Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to listen to us talk. I am Sam Delaney. I am a writer and broadcaster. I am the author of a book called Sort Your Head Out, Mental Health Out the Bollocks, which is about mental health, and it's a little bit relevant to what we're going to talk about over the next 40 minutes or so. I'm delighted to say I am joined by the fantastic award-winning author David Whitehouse, and by...
Thank you very much.
And by the fantastic sports journalist from The Athletic, Roshane Thomas. The title of this event is Creativity, Identity and Mental Health. Thank you. That's what it's about. Right, okay, so I wanted to do a talk about mental health because that's what I write a great deal about, and it's what my book's about. I wanted an excuse to talk about my book. But, you know, knowing what this whole festival and this endeavour is geared around, I did get to thinking about the effect that, or the role that your mental health plays in a creative career. Not least if you feel when you join the creative industries that you might be a bit out of place, you don't feel entirely confident in your own voice. That's something that anyone from any sort of background can suffer from. It's one of the biggest obstacles and challenges in a creative career, I think. But I think in particular, if you go into a creative environment, you go into the media and you feel that for whatever reason you're not necessarily surrounded by people who you are familiar with, you might feel out of place, you might suffer from imposter syndrome, then that can really impact upon your ability to be creative and sort of cultivate your own creative voice. And those are big challenges, and they're challenges that I think probably are familiar to everyone. They're certainly familiar to the three of us sitting here today. I'm not going to go big into my own story because we want to hear more about these guys and then hopefully take some questions from you guys too. But, you know, we were talking beforehand. I've been a journalist my whole life, first in print and then in broadcast. And, you know, that's an industry that's sort of predominantly or disproportionately occupied by privately educated people, certainly in the senior levels, and people who maybe went to Oxford, Cambridge, and every study and statistic sort of shows that. I grew up in a council estate and went to a state school, and so when I first got into places like the BBC or broadsheet newspapers, there were times where I felt a little out of place, and that probably did affect my confidence and the pace at which I felt able to really express myself in my own terms. However, I had a big advantage over a lot of people from my estate in that I did know people who worked in creative jobs, not in journalism, but in other creative industries, and I'd seen people in my sort of extended family, or I knew friends who'd made money out of a creative job, and so at least it seemed familiar to me. Even though I didn't know anyone at my school or in my street who did that sort of thing, it didn't seem completely alien. And so I'm very aware of the fact that that was a big advantage for me in terms of my own self-confidence going into some of these environments, even though the people were very different. So that's a little bit about me. I want to introduce you more to these guys now, though. Roshane, we first met years ago when you were quite junior at TalkSport, and I was presenting, and you were still making the tea at that point.
Terrible tea, by the way.
It was terrible tea. I remember that vividly. And at that point, I thought, this bloke's got no chance. But as it happens now, you know, you're absolutely flying. You spent time at TalkSport. You spent time at the Sunday Times. Yeah. You've been at The Athletic since it launched, which is, what's that now, 4 years?
4 years, yeah, 4 years this month.
4 years. Tell us about your route into journalism, and, you know, when did you decide that's what you wanted to do in your career?
For sure. Well, I'm 29. And I say from the age of 14, I knew this is what I wanted to do. So, like with most guys, you want to be a footballer. So I said I was a failed right back, wasn't quite good enough. But I loved English, and I had a great teacher called Mr. Lynch. And he was like, look, I know you're not going to be successful in football, try a career in journalism. And I'll never forget, I remember one day, I was getting ready for school and I put GMTV on and I saw a black journalist by the name of Darren Lewis. And I was like, wow, like, as a black journalist, that's incredible. And the reason why I say that because I hadn't seen a black journalist before that. So straight away I saw someone who I could relate to. And I'm like, cool, it's possible. So fast forward to 4 years, I'm in college and I'm doing loads of work experience, just trying to get my name out there. But at the time, I didn't have money for an NCTJ, which is the course you do to get all the qualifications to become a journalist. So I had to think outside the box. So I started making a blog, and I was just recycling anything I saw online, stuff on Sky Sports, anything I saw, I was just recycling online, just so I could have my own blog so people could see what I was doing. And then fast forward to uni, in my last year, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna make sure I get a job before I graduate. That was my goal. I need to get a job before I graduate. So I was going everywhere. I was going Hello Magazine, I was doing workplaces at Peterborough United. And just for context, I live in Brixton, South London. So for me to go somewhere like Peterborough, that's far. It's like 2 hours on train, my own money, no one's paying me. I'm just doing it because I just want to get a chance somewhere. And I know down the road, it'll pay off in the end. So I was going to Peterborough, I was going to Barnet, Sheffield United, far places. And I was at TalkSport, and I was there so much, they were like, you know what, I need to give you a job because you're here all the time. So thankfully I got a job at TalkSport before I graduated. And for me, like, even whenever I go to schools and talk to like people who want to become a journalist, I tell them you have to love this. Like, it's something you have to love because there's good days and there's bad days, probably more bad days than good days. But the love of it will get you through. So I get the job at TalkSport. And then after that, I'm at the Sunday Times, and then literally, I get a random phone call one day from a journalist by the name of Oliver Kay, and he was like, what are you doing now? And I'm like, I'm actually thinking of having a career change and join the police force as a detective.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because I'm fascinated by like crime documentaries and all of this. I could waste a whole day watching crime documentaries. So I thought, well, I'm still young, why not try something different?
And why were you thinking that? Was it because you didn't feel like journalism was turning out how you'd hoped?
No, I was still enjoying it, but I thought time and age still on my side.
Yeah.
I can fall back on journalism, try something different. So yeah, me and Oliver Kay were having a catch up. He's like, mate, forget all of that rubbish. I have something much better for you. And it was for me to get this job out of the Athletic. But obviously I cover West Ham, so I speak to our boss, who's Alex Kajolski, and he says to me, so let's say it's the Friday, he gives me a call and says, I'm going to meet you tomorrow, but you're covering Burnley. So I'm thinking, Burnley, that's far. So straight away I get home and I'm typing like, good barbershops in Burnley. That's so I can see if I can actually do it. But look, it could have been Burnley, it could have been Sheffield, anywhere. I was going to take the job anyway. So I see him the following day. I have like 10 story ideas for Burnley. I'm like, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do this, I'll do that. He's like, okay, that's a good idea, that's the right idea. Okay, that could be a bit better. And when he starts laughing, so straight away I start thinking, oh no, I've messed up somehow, I'm not going to get the job. And he's like, I like you, I can tell you're a cool guy. And when he says, you're actually not covering Burnley, you're covering West Ham. So me saying yes to meeting him to cover Burnley was a test to see how determined I was.
Wow.
And so remember I said before, I was going to far places like Peterborough and Sheffield and whatnot. That put me in good stead because I was willing to go the extra yard, even if it was Burnley. So I've been doing it for the past 4 years. Just very quickly, any West Ham fans here? West Ham fans? Okay.
Hey.
So I've been doing it for the past 4 years, and that's pretty much a brief background about how I've been doing this job.
So you've got a lot of determination, mate. Like a few points in that story where I'm thinking he really drove himself, and you were extremely determined. Where do you think that came from?
Good question. I'd always say back to when I wanted to be a footballer, and I wasn't the best player in the team, and I still wanted to prove the coach wrong. I remember in primary school when the coach, I would never be in the squad, but every Sunday I was there. I'll bring my football boots and shin pads, and the coach was like, "You're not in the squad." I'm like, "Yeah, but just in case someone gets injured or..." So from a young age, I've always been like that. I remember I used to be a ball boy for Arsenal. And before I actually made it through to become a ball boy, but it was 1 year, and I know I absolutely smashed via the trial, and I didn't get selected, and I sent an angry email saying, I was the best person, why did I get selected? And they were like, just come again next year, and who knows, maybe you could get selected, and thankfully I did. So, yeah, from a young age, I've always been determined.
Brilliant. Right, Dave, let's talk a bit about your background. You grew up in Nuneaton. Yeah. And you, I mean, again, when I first met you, we were both working in magazines in the noughties. You were a magazine journalist to begin with, and then you sort of, you quit that to focus your whole career on being a full-time author, didn't you? And
I was just quite a shit journalist, I think. But yeah, I'm from Nuneaton. I left there in 1990. Nuneaton is a town just on the outside of Coventry. The year I left, 1999, Coventry was named the roughest city in Europe.
Coventry was?
Yeah, that's war-torn Europe. But always wanted to leave. And in the first 18 years of my life, I didn't meet a single person, to the best of my knowledge, that worked in the creative industry.
Yeah.
I never saw anyone like me do anything like that, really. But that's because I wasn't aware of class. I didn't meet anyone posh until only one university accepted my application, which was in London. And I went there, and the halls were full, and because I was late, and you got put on a find a flatmate list. And I got paired with this other student who'd been to Radley, which is beneath Eton, the poshest school in Britain, I think.
So that's we had what it says on its crest.
The poshest school in Britain.
Second poshest school.
Yeah. The Hogwarts thing. Yeah. And but it was the first time I'd met anyone who wasn't particularly like me, and I was living with him in this kind of odd couple relationship. Yeah. He was a film student, and his A-level film starred Desmond Llewellyn, who used to play Q in the James Bond films, right. Which wasn't, my experience of anything I made during my A-levels. But kind of going through university, it fell into a job in the magazine industry. The only thing I could ever do was write, and my house burned down one day and I nearly died. And I wrote about that and won a competition run by the Evening Standard at Journalism Awards. No, run by the Times. It was a journalism award thing. And that got me my first job in men's magazines, which was where I met you. But at the time, the men's magazine industry wasn't the industry that I fell in love with. And, it was becoming about people from Hollyoaks in bikinis, and that wasn't necessarily the things I wanted to write about. And so one day, in a mixture of naivety and unemployability, which has kind of dogged my entire career, really, I started writing a book. And I'd never met anyone who'd ever done anything like that before, to the extent that I Googled, how do you write a novel? And it said you had to write 5,000 words, which I did, exactly 5,000 words, full stop. Send that to an agent, and chanced my way in that way, really.
Right.
Yeah.
So, determination, but also circumstance. You didn't feel like you had many options, so you thought you might as well go for something, play a wild card. A
determination born of the need to survive. If I stop working or don't have work, it wasn't like I want to be an author. I want to have a book published. It was never that for me. It was like I can do one thing, which is write. So if I don't do that, I won't be able to afford to eat. So I was unemployed. The phone wasn't ringing. I was literally sitting in bed every day. The first book is called Bed, and it's about a man that never gets out of bed. My first novel. I wrote it in bed. Which I didn't get out of because I didn't have anywhere to go. I had no money. I was on the beans on toast diet, and so I was writing about it because I couldn't do anything else. And it's to this day, this is I wrote the book in 2007. It took 4 or 5 years to get it published, but to this day, it's the creative industry. My approach to it has been I want to work in it and I want to succeed in it, but I'm doing it because it's the only thing I can do.
Right. And can I just ask you about that period in your life? Because for me, the biggest pressure on like my mental health, the biggest trigger to like, you know, bad periods of mental health I've had in my life have always been moments where I have felt desperate and that, you know, you're worried about your career, you're worried about money. Those things are very real. For me personally, that really impacts to a huge extent about my ability to be creative, to write or do anything. And it has a hugely negative effect. So I'm fascinated when I hear stories like yours, which is when you found yourself in that situation, but actually you used that time quite productively. It obviously didn't drag you down into a place where you couldn't be creative anymore.
No, there's a degree to which it did, and I was having to write through that. I mean, the book is literally about a man and the question is, why did he take to his bed in the first place? And is it a metaphor for depression and the apathy that comes of that? But in terms of the negative effects of it on my mental health, the key one was probably ostracism. If you feel like you're on the outside of an industry, which everyone does when they're trying to break into a creative industry, it's like if you feel like you're on the outside of your marriage or you're on the outside of a friendship or the outside of any relationship, it has a detrimental effect on your mental health. And what I found was when you get into the industry, and a lot of people there went to private schools and have paid educations and stuff, they come into it with a confidence that's instilled in them by their education and by the people they've met along the way that meant that they never really felt outside of it. And that's invaluable, really, because you can, if you're on the outside of it, you spend so much time het up and worrying about it that you don't have the space and time to find your voice.
Yeah. And how do you get through that?
I don't think you ever do, because I think it's set in you during your formative years.
Yeah. So
I remember meeting my first publisher, and the first thing they did was take me to this party in East London for a Turner Prize-winning artist, and me just being so on the outside of it. I just remember everyone seemed to be quoting kind of Oscar Wilde all the entire time, and being really kind of happy about that. And me just at this party, the first day I'd ever met my publishers, just spinning out and getting shit-faced to deal with it, like dangerously drunk.
Yeah.
Left all my stuff there, my bags, got home, didn't know what was going on, realised I'd left my stuff, tried to find the party again. By then it had probably closed, I'm trying to break back in. I'm about to be a published author, and these are my publishers. It's really, really embarrassing, but I was just on the outside of the thing and didn't have the...
Yeah.
What I didn't have that other people had was the language, the lexicon.
Yeah, yeah. Roshane, I mean, that feeling of being on the outside, you mentioned like TalkSport being one of the first places. Now, like I said earlier, I was working at TalkSport around the time you started. I was on air. I think there was one black full-time member of staff. It's changed now.
Yeah.
It's much more diverse now. But in those days, there was Warren.
Well, yeah.
You remember Warren, right?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, well, we're covering football here, which actually does have a very, the players, there is a huge diversity within the sport that we're covering, but there wasn't. And did that affect your feelings or your confidence when you first joined?
Not really, because what I referenced earlier, the work experience I was doing, I was also going to like other events, and I would have been, I'm going to say, 21 at the time, and I went to an athletics event in Sheffield. So I got my accreditation, everyone was lovely, and then I met this one person, and then she was like, we don't get faces like you around here often. And I was like, well, here I am, I'm the first one here today, and I tried to laugh it off. And it wasn't until after it hit me, I was like, wow, she really did say that.
Yeah.
And it's something I'll never forget. And ever since I've been like, I know by and large if I go to a match, even now at West Ham, I know predominantly I'll be the only black person really.
Yeah.
There may be one or two others, just the nature of the industry and how it is.
Yeah.
Because over the past 10 years, it's changed, but it hasn't changed. So you may see more black faces on TV, but in terms of the press box, it's still the same. But I've never really let it faze me, besides that one time that I referenced just now. I sort of just try to use it to my advantage. So for example, if I'm at a game and there's mixed zone, and just for context, mixed zone is an area where footballers walk past, so you can ask them questions.
Yeah.
let's say someone like, who can I think of? Someone like a Marcus Rashford. Marcus Rashford is probably more likely to stop for me than like, let's say, a middle-aged white man because, one, I could have more things me and him could like have in common. So we could talk about haircuts and like skin fades.
Yeah.
And a middle-aged white person will have a clue what a skin fade is. So that's an advantage you can try and use it to. So yeah.
You mentioned Darren Lewis earlier. I know Darren, he's a great guy, and I think you've mentioned to me before, he has helped you, so you've got to know him. He's mentored you to a degree. Is that right? And how important is having someone like that?
Yeah, hugely important. Still a mentor to this day, in fact. And you touched on mental health earlier and some of the challenges you had. I remember, so I got the job July 2019. And the first 3-4 months, I was struggling with my confidence. Yeah. Struggling big time. I doubted myself a lot. And then there was one day when I found Darren, like broke down. I was like, I'm terrible. I'm gonna get sacked. I'm doing a terrible job. My confidence is just down. And he was like, what are you talking about? Like, you're doing a great job. You're fantastic. Stop doubting yourself. I don't ever want you to phone me and start a service ever again. And literally, a week after that, I had my biggest ever story for the Athletic. So, do many of you follow football? Many of you follow football? So, I saw on late Christmas Eve, that a footballer by the name of Mikel Antonio had crashed his Lamborghini while dressed as a snowman. So I was like, it's Christmas Eve. I don't want to do the story right now because I'm with family, I'm eating good food, I don't want to leave right now. So I woke up the following morning and I realised no one had covered the story. So I told the desk, look, this is what's happened. No one's covered it, like we should do it. And then I have an editor by the name of Laura Williamson. She found the address in like 0.5 seconds. She found the address in no time. So I get to the location. And then
on Christmas Day?
Yeah, Christmas Day. And then, Boxing Day rather. So it happened on Christmas Day, I get to the Boxing Day. And I get to the house, and the homeowner, she's on the phone. So I'm like, okay, I'll be respectful, let her get off the phone first. And then she gets off the phone. I'm like, hi, my name's Roshane Thomas. I'm a journalist from The Athletic. I heard what happened yesterday. Any chance I can ask you a couple of questions? Nope, I don't want to talk to you. Nope. Like, go away, sort of vibes. Now, I have two options. Because it's Boxing Day, right? And for those who don't follow football, there's always a match on Boxing Day. And on this day, it was Crystal Palace v West Ham. So I could go to Crystal Palace v West Ham. I told the desk, look, I tried my best. She said no. That's how it worked out. Or I could try and work the charm and get her to invite me in. Now, for context, my parents are Jamaican. And when my dad was younger, he was quite the womanizer. So I think I get my charm from my dad. So obviously the day before was, as I mentioned, Christmas Day, right? So I'm like, I bet you cooked a great turkey the day before. I bet it was wonderful. I bet you got some lovely presents. So I'm trying to make her laugh. And then after about a minute of working the charm, she was like, okay, come in. And when she said come in, I was like, bingo, I've got the story. So remember I said the week before, I was crying to Darren Lewis telling him I'm doing a terrible job.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get sacked, and then a week after, that happens. So it just goes to show you can never really doubt yourself.
And that went like massive, that story. I mean, it's one of my favourite football stories of the last few years. It's hilarious. You've got the image and everything of him coming out the sunroof in someone's front garden dressed as a snowman on Christmas Eve. I mean,
Crazy.
It was spectacular, and it went super viral. But, you know, like what Darren said to you to sort of lift you back up, you wouldn't have been there if not. Because when your confidence is low, you just flat, and you would have been, fuck that, I'm not going the extra mile, because you don't feel like it affects your energy, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it really does.
When your mental health is knocked.
And it's crazy because like that story was sort of my like I've arrived moment. Because before, when I go to matches, people say, oh, how's it going? You're okay, you're right, but not often. I swear, the latest game after that story, how's it going, Roshane? You're right. I saw your story, it was really good. How's it going? You want a cup of tea? Like, everyone was so friendly. So it goes to how it can change, just like that. So yeah.
Dave, you've 3 novels. The Bed, which you mentioned earlier, and modestly didn't didn't mention it was a big award winner. So that was a breakthrough because it was your first book, but also it won a big award. You've had 2 novels since then, and last year About a Son came out as your first non-fiction, which was like one of the most critically acclaimed books of the year. Has all of that done anything to make you feel when you sit down now and you're working on your next book, does it mean that you can approach a blank page with any more sense of belonging and confidence?
No.
Not at all?
No. No. I think you write a first novel or a first book of any kind, not knowing what you're doing and feeling the pressures of that. You write a second, third, and fourth, not knowing what you're doing, but people are watching a little bit, and the pressure of that is probably even worse.
Right.
But writing is unique in the creative industries in that with every word you put down, it feels like it's telling you how bad you are at the job, because the idea for a novel or the idea for a story is a perfect thing, and the more you write, the further you get away from it. I always liken the kind of starting a novel to thinking, this is going to be great, this is going to be amazing, this is going to sell 1 million copies, and everyone's going to love it. That's kind of setting off in a sports car, and the end result is the crash that you have.
Right.
And that has a detrimental effect on your mental health, not being able to realise what it is you're doing, constantly feeling like it's not good enough, which I think is probably the same in any creative industry. I know actors that feel the same way, I know musicians that feel the same way. You're playing against yourself the entire time.
Yeah.
And you're alone.
Yeah, that's I mean, mental health terms, you're alone. There's people here who might be creatives, but they work in offices with other people, with mentors. Roshane, you have a team around you at the Athletic.
Yeah.
Your line of work is just totally solitary. I mean, that must be very brutal on the bad days.
It's years of solitude at a time. Bad days, it's very bad. You find yourself kind of craving meetings or coming to things like this and just not being able to stop talking and being quite kind of like mental, and not wanting meetings to end as well, which is quite unique, and not like getting off Zoom calls or letting people finish things. Just don't want to be alone. Like I'm just going to keep talking now until this.
Yeah, it's fine, man. We're all here for you.
It is a life of solitude. Not that I'd swap it, because I can't do anything else.
Yeah.
But it makes your moods very weird. Like I'll go home in the evening, I haven't spoken to anyone all day, and I'm talking nonsense.
Yeah, yeah. We've got 15 minutes left. Do we have any questions? We do. There's a hand up back there.
Hi, my name's Natalie. I have a question for David. I've always wanted to write a book. I've had a lot of people say to me, oh, your story, like what's happened to me in my life and stuff, you should write a book. And I'm always like, yeah, because I've always written in my life, throughout my life. I used to write like little books when I was in school and A4 binder books, and my friends used to say, can we read your books? I used to like rent it out in the lunch times and stuff for people to read them and stuff like that. So I've always done it, but my question is, because my story still kind of isn't finished, because people are saying I should write about my life. When do I know when it's time to start the book if I haven't really got to the end of my story? Like where do I put the full stop?
The only advice I can really give to anyone, I think it applies here, is start now, right now. People get frozen by the fear that they don't know the end of a thing or can't do the whole thing, so that they shouldn't start. I'm writing a book at the moment. I've got no idea. It's a non-fiction book, and still I've got no idea what's going to happen at the end. But you're going to find out more about the end of your story along the way than you are sitting and waiting for it. And I think that should be the same of any creative industry. It is to borrow a term, it's a just do it thing. I think in the writing of it, you'll know when it's ready. I think waiting is not the worst thing you can do, but you're shying away from the beginning of it, and it sounds to me like you desperately want to start it, and you shouldn't fight that. You'll figure it out as you go along.
Great. Inspirational.
Thanks.
No, it is. Any more questions? One here.
Hi, you talked about imposter syndrome, and Roshane, you talked about one of your colleagues giving you validation and words of affirmation to bring you out of that situation. But to all of you, do you have any self-tips to bring yourself out of those situations where you might be feeling inadequate or unqualified for the situation that you are in? Because imposter syndrome never really leaves us, no matter, as you said, Dave, no matter how successful you get. So I wondered if there was any sort of self-motivational techniques that you guys do to help you out in those situations.
Me personally, when I was younger, I used to sort of make a habit of saying to myself in my head, it's okay because they're all wankers. And that made me feel better. But I don't necessarily think I don't think I do that now, but I did used to think it. I'd be like, right, everyone in this room feels different to me and is acting different to me and all seem a bit smug, and I don't seem in on this joke, but that's all right because they're wankers. I'm the one who's not a wanker, right? I would tell myself that, which is sort of a bit insane, but it helped.
It's not true either.
It's not true. I am a wanker. I was then, I am now. Anyone will tell you. But it did help for me to tell myself that narrative. Now, to be honest, I mean, it sounds cheesy, but to be honest, I sort of try to withdraw from the context I'm in and just focus on the things that are much more simple and at the core of my life that I feel that I can do and that I am good at. Whether that's your relationships with the people close to you and stuff like that, which sounds corny, but it stops you spiraling downwards because you can just focus on the things in your life that you have much more confidence about, the people who love or respect you or that you love and respect, and the things that you're doing in your life, even if they're simple day-to-day things that you are, that you feel competent at and you feel valued for. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I can wake up and write a lot better or broadcast a lot better. Well, it does really. It does make me feel, because it's just like I'm ignoring all the noise about, thoughts that will make me think that I don't fit in or I'm not good enough or I'm a fraud in my work, I suppose that's what I do now. What about you guys?
I've met loads of authors. Some of them, really famous and successful. I don't think I've met any of them that don't have imposter syndrome. And if everyone's an imposter, no one's an imposter. The ones I've met that I suspect don't have imposter syndrome have all been wankers. But I mean, you can think that all you like. I think the trick is reminding yourself of that, and going into these. If you go to a literary thing, or you're talking at a literary event, or you think that everyone's more successful than you, they're kind of triggers that make you forget that actually everyone's an imposter and make you feel alone and stuff. So reminding yourself of it is quite hard. There was a time I used to write "Everything is all right" on my hand.
Wow.
To remind myself, to kind of ground myself in the reality that this might be okay. And I still do that from time to time. I don't know if that's a useful tip, but you can have it.
I can touch on that. That's what I do now. I just write down things that I'm really grateful for, because I don't do it on my phone. I actually get pen and paper. I write it down because it's more of a thing. You're thinking about it a lot more. Because when you're having bad days, it's easy to be like, things aren't going so great. But you're writing down stuff you're grateful for. It takes you out of that negative headspace, I reckon. I'm not sure if it's a great example, but the last time I sort of was in that headspace was about, I'm gonna say November time. It was Everton v West Ham, and the match is finished. I think it's a 1-1 draw. And I never start the press conference after games. It's normally someone else, and I'm second person. The person who normally starts first, he wasn't there that day. So I started the press conference, but instead of me saying, "Oh, you're right, David Moyes," I say Moisey. And that's like the unofficial nickname for David Moyes, but no one ever calls him Moisey. So I say it, and he starts laughing, drops the F-bomb and says like, "We're not that close." Now everyone in the room starts laughing, and I'm thinking, oh no, like, you know, I think, why did I say that? Like, why did I say that? And then people in the room are saying, I would never have said that. So I felt so crap that day, so crap.
Did you?
I felt terrible.
I feel bad now because I did take the piss out of you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
The journey from Liverpool to London is about 2.5 train rides. So the whole train ride back, I'm like, the clip goes viral on social media. Everyone's like, Roshane, like, I know I recognize that voice. Was it you? I'm muting Twitter. I'm not saying a word. And then it's only now I can laugh about it. But even Moyes himself, he said, "Listen, I was just joking with you. Like, no hard feelings, nothing intended." And like through that, I'll even say like our bonds have been a lot closer. Just through him having a joke about that. So even through bad times, something good could also come out of it. So yeah.
Okay. Right. Another question back there. Oh, they missed you. Sorry, you're next.
Sorry.
Right.
How do you look after your mental health when dealing with like personal deadlines or expectations by employers?
Me, myself, it still can get to me, and I do think that I used to, I've been freelance most of my career. I've had the odd sort of proper job, but not very often. And so I've always sort of done that thing of like overstretching myself, always used to say yes to too many things, very often finding myself with too many plates to spin, too many deadlines. And, you know, for years that led to me having all sorts of terrible episodes, mental health-wise, physical health-wise, drinking too much, taking drugs in my past, because I now realise that I was consistently overwhelming myself with too much, and I had no concept. No one had ever told me what a healthy amount to work was, or what a healthy amount to rest was, or, you know, I just thought, you know, again, a bit for like, you know, if you don't have a financial safety net in your life, you just say yes to everything, and it never crosses your mind that you shouldn't just work every hour that God gives you. But I literally, throughout my 20s, I was hospitalised on a number of occasions. Like, I spent weekends in A&E all over London because very often just collapsing from and doctors kept me in there. It's happened on a number of occasions all weekend, trying to work out what the matter was, beyond the fact that I had been off my tits. And they go, you're burnt out, like, you need to take it easy. And I'd just laugh at the idea of it. So now I just... You know, I mean, you still have to think of paying the bills, and work still needs to get done. But balance is the most important thing I've learned in terms of my own mental health. Like, really putting your own health before anything else, and making sure that you don't take on more than you can handle, and that you organise the parts of your life properly, so you've got enough time set aside for yourself, for rest, for family, and for work, and you compartmentalise it all. Because, deadlines and not setting boundaries with the people you work for are the things that tip me over the edge again and again and again throughout my 20s and 30s. And that's the biggest lesson I've learned. You've got to just put yourself first and set boundaries. What about you guys?
Yes, it's thinking about yourself more, which sounds kind of selfish but isn't. But also, you know, often I have to remind myself that other people aren't thinking about me. When people are kind of deadlines and you feel like they're pressuring you for jobs and stuff, they go home and they sit and have dinner with their families and relax and stuff. And there's a tendency, I think, a human tendency, if you're doing something creative, just to imagine everyone's thinking about it. And it's not true, really. It's your own fight, and you have to take care of yourself in it, I think.
No, for sure. I'll say I agree with Sam in terms of having a balance. I found it's important to have distractions that help deal with mental health. So for me, I love doing swimming. So I'll go for a swim whenever I can because I'm not thinking about work. When I'm thinking about trying to be someone quicker than the other person, the next lane. Or cinema, for example. I think cinema is great because when you're watching a film, you're not thinking about anything else but that film, whether it's an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And in terms of deadlines, I say sometimes you've got to be a bit selfish. Because when I was younger, because for work we have a 2 p.m. deadline, so we've got to file 3 pieces a week, and it's got to be in by 2. So let's say I have a piece that's meant to go out on Friday, I have to file by 2 p.m. on Thursday. So when I first started, I'd make sure I always meet the 2 p.m. deadline, even if the piece was terrible. Whereas now, with more experience, I'll be like, look, if it's in for 2, it's in for 2. If it's for 2:30, it's got to be 2:30. If it's 3 p.m., I'm sorry, but it's got to be 3 p.m. So that's where sometimes being a bit more selfish can use it to your advantage. And sometimes they appreciate that because they're like, okay, we know we're not going to get it for that certain time, but at least you're doing everything you can to make it the best quality or piece you're doing. So yeah.
Yeah. Great. I think there was someone here.
Hello, thanks for your panel. Yeah, I've worked in advertising for 20 years in PR, which is full of terrible environments for mental health, sort of plying you with...
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? More?
Yeah.
Excellent. But you actually took me back to... I was saying I worked in advertising for 20 years, which is an environment that's really sort of bad for mental health, lots of booze and drugs and parties. But I was thinking back to... Weirdly, my dad stepped onto telly in the 50s and was told not to use his Belfast accent. He said, under no circumstances should you use your accent. And he stepped onto telly and used his accent. And whereas someone from the next street, Ken Branagh, felt he couldn't use his accent. To this day, people think he's from England. And I was just thinking of all the people that he was kind of surrounded by. They were often from kind of working class in old language backgrounds, like his best mate was George Best. And a lot of these kids found themselves in environments where, and I think sport and creativity, where almost everything counted against them. One of my great regrets as a kid was not going down the pub to meet George Best, because by that point he was just the alcoholic guy that was getting drunk in the pub. And then, of course, the more mental health declines of public figures, the more the press, I guess, makes that even worse. You only have to look at the Hugh Edwards thing this week, where before it's even determined what he's done, the press has decided he's a paedophile or whatever else he is, or he's coming out as gay, whatever it is. So I was just thinking, do you think that, like, the irony is the creative industries tend to often attract people that are either neurodiverse or from backgrounds that aren't traditionally kind of set up to kind of feed you into the creative industries, and then ironically the environments kind of are pretty bad for mental health. You look at backstage areas that, you know, actors hang out, again, full of booze, full of sort of toxic environments, and then of course the press on top of that seem to add to that toxicity by kind of building people up when they're good and knocking them down when they fail. And I just wondered what you thought about that kind of ironic disconnect between creatives who tend to be from interesting backgrounds and have diverse brains, and then have environments and press that are pretty unhelpful to their work.
I do think that, you know, you want people with, like, you know, you want people who are maybe a bit, for want of a better word, mad or different, or don't think in conventional ways in any creative industry if it's going to be interesting, right? And maybe in the past, I think it's true that a lot of creative industries haven't kind of looked out for those people. I mean, certainly in all the ones I've worked in magazines, in newspapers, certainly in radio and TV, I mean, you know, it was like almost a certain level of insanity was encouraged. I think that's changing now. I don't know. I don't work in an office. I don't have an employer really. You do. I don't know whether it's different. Certainly when I worked in editorial rooms on magazines, or when I've worked in radio stations, it very often felt as if, like, wild behaviour, irresponsibility, mad shit was encouraged, and the more it was going on, the more, like, the bosses felt as if something was going right. And maybe there was something in that, maybe like an atmosphere of a little bit of anarchy kind of generated exciting content to a degree. And And as for the press, I'd like to say that they've improved, but I think the coverage that we've seen this year of scandals, including the one going on right now, suggests that the media still is feeding off of kind of big dramas about people who are vulnerable or flawed or have made mistakes, and that seems to be what large areas of the press still feed off. I felt like the coverage of this story at the moment, the Hugh Edwards story, is really like a bit of a throwback to the 80s. I don't know about you. I thought that kind of stuff had gone, but I wonder whether or not, because the press is in such crisis and no newspapers make money anymore, there's a race to the bottom, and they may well be reverting to a sort of a much more populist and brutal form of journalism, because this feels like the sort of story that I felt even The Sun had stopped running in a tone that I thought had been dropped by the press who'd tried, or at least said they were becoming slightly more gentle. So that's my thoughts on that.
I'd agree there's a complete disconnect. Most people I know try and get into the creative industries tend to have, be somewhere on a spectrum of neurodiversity, and I don't see that in the boardrooms of the gatekeepers of the people who decide who gets record deals or who decide which books get published, or So it's odd that the people making the work are at odds with the people who decide who gets to make it,
What's it like at The Athletic? I mean, obviously, I don't suppose you're here to slag off your employer, but it's interesting because it's a very new company. It's it's effectively a start-up, isn't it? I mean, but it's very big on both sides of the Atlantic. But it's not one of these old legacy media brands. Yeah. So I've got a sense that I've worked for them a bit. I get a sense it's a bit younger, more modern. Do you feel as if, if you compare it to like TalkSport, where we've both worked, which I would say, especially in that era, positively encouraged everyone to misbehave, are things different at The Athletic?
Yeah, it's how can I wear it? It's like having new neighbours and every week they have a party.
Right.
That's pretty much how I wear it, because it's a fun place to work for sure. Loads of opportunities. The travel budget is amazing. I must say, the travel budget is amazing at The Athletic. Get to go to beautiful places in Europe for sure. But also because of the staff we have and how talented everyone is, it makes you want to, raise your game and be one of the best as well. So you have that competitive element, which is good, because in football terms, you've got a start 11, everyone wants to be the start 11, no one wants to be in the bench. And that's how I'll say it is at The Athletic. Everyone wants to be the best, everyone's bringing great ideas, you've got to bring a game every week. And also, it's nice to say you work for The Athletic. It's like Pepsi, Coke, it's a brand, you know what the value they have. Let's say now The Athletic, 4 years in, we're like that now. We know what we do, we know what we stand for. If you tell someone you work for The Athletic, they're like, tell me more, what's that person like, how do you do this? So that's what I found over the past 4 years.
Great stuff. I think we had one more somewhere, is just here. Oh, we got to wrap it up. You can ask us afterwards. Thank you ever so much, everyone, for coming along. We're all honoured to have been here. He lives in Margate, so, and you're going to Deal now, aren't you? Yep. So it's worked out quite well, the whole thing, for all of us. From a logistical point of view, I just want you all to know that. But thanks ever so much for listening, and we'll be around afterwards, I think, unless you have to jump straight on the train if you want to ask us any questions. Cheers. All the best.
Cheers.